Oh, there we go. This is the Lean Into Art Cast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers get together and we talk about creative topics that we find worth pondering. And they may not have concrete answers, but we give it a good exploration and offer some food for thought along the way. And I am coder and designer Rob Stenzinger, and along with me is my co-host.
Jerzy Drozd, cartoonist and teaching artist. Hey, Rob.
Hey, Jerzy. That awkward pause was maybe an internet thing. I was waiting for the little card to drop. So anyway,
Oh, okay. So yes. We're experimenting with. Usually, I kick off the episodes, but I liked it better when we were trading off who kicked off the episodes. And so I said, "Hey, Rob, why don't you start this one off?" And then I said, as soon as the music fades, you kick in. Well, the problem is the way the Google Hangouts work is if I drop the card that we hold up at the beginning of it, you just see my face. And everybody would expect me to talk, so I was leaving it up, thinking that we should have
Gotcha.
walked.
Yeah,
We
cool.
should have done
Anyway,
a dress rehearsal.
Should have done dress rehearsal. Hey, it's fun. We experiment. We learn stuff, right? And
It was great because I got to hear you go, "Whoa!"
I was like, oh. Anyway, that's one of the things we do with this is we try things out, and we like to take a general pattern to some of the topics that we work on. I mean, we have this approach to the show where we start with a bit of a warm up, but we don't know exactly what kind of warm up it's going to be. We go from that warm up into taking a look at our topic in the abstract and take a walk around it, and then we dive deep into the details and hopefully pull out something useful from a different angle. Like each section is not meant to just spin fill up air with our voices, but there's different kinds of handy things that we hope to generate by exploring it and seeing what comes out of that high level and then the detail stuff when we're on the ground. And so Jerzy,
Yes, Rob.
I was wondering, I know I have a curveball, but I'm happy to defer as well.
Now, I saw in the notes that when you said you had a curveball, I was like, all right, I'll just take it on rather than come up with one of my silly ones. Like I still feel a little bit like I came up short on the last one when I said like what's a guilty pleasure. I need to up my game.
That's pshaw. I mean, it's I actually have got caught in the rut of here's me self-critiquing, right? So let's do a quick self-critique baseball
Please.
card trade, right? So
Self-critique baseball card trade.
I've for me, I'm thinking I often go way too connected to to our main topic. It's like I can't help myself. I'm always tempted to like find this extra little nugget of something that happens to relate to the topic, and that's not really the purpose of the curveball.
No, and here's where I'm going to counter you, and I'm going to throw in a Darryl Strawberry rookie card on top of my trade. I think that's a good thing to do overall because it makes it into. I mean, this is totally inside baseball, and just continuing on with this metaphor of baseball cards, but it makes it into a cohesive product, right? Not product in a crass sense, but like we're shipping something when we do this show, and so having something that feels cohesive and unified under a theme, it may come off as artificial sometimes, but I also think it comes across as processed and packaged and carefully thought through by the people who are making the thing, right? It's not willy nilly.
Very true. All right, fair enough. I mean, there's totally pros and cons for that approach.
Talking about trade-offs. We're talking about trade-offs. Yeah.
And let's see. I am going to throw out my curveball and experiment with one of the other ones that I've gathered here from.
Oh, great! So you give me like a week to prepare for this curveball, and I was going to
Totally
pretend like I didn't do any pre-thinking on it, and now you're actually going to make me like think of like, all right, card out the window. Here we go. Let's do it.
How will you know when you're grown up?
How will I know when I'm grown up? Oh, Rob, you are pushing me right up against my bias. There's like this big sandpaper encrusted wheel spinning called my bias, and you just pushed me right into it, and the skin is coming off of me. How do you know when you're a grown up? Because okay, let me break it down. Break down my thinking process on this. Because you're talking to a guy who posted on Instagram a couple weeks ago that he got a 13 or 14-inch tall He-Man figure and was probably a little unduly excited about it. Like I made a noise when I opened the box and saw that that was in there, right? So, to some groups, that would be, well, he's not a grown up because he gets excited about things that are not artifacts of adult behavior. I didn't get that excited about getting a big TV or anything, right? Or getting like an SUV or anything like that, right? Like there's just this outward trappings that we associate with grown-ups, right? And then there's also like putting away. So that's the physical part of putting away childish things. But there's also another kind of putting away childish things, which is like pettiness, greediness, thinking, being self-absorbed, right? Me. I'm hungry. When's lunch? I'm going to pester you about this right now. I'm going to push the other kid in the playground because I feel bad right now and I don't know how to express it properly. That's childish behavior that you're supposed to outgrow. And then there's like another level of that when you get into like, junior high and high school. So to oversimplify all this stuff, like I throw away the whole, I mean, there's a certain kind of outward trapping part of being a grown up that I think actually a lot of us can agree upon. It's like being a responsible person who contributes to society as best you can. That's part of it. Not depending on others because you don't feel like taking care of yourself, right? I mean, there's situations where you can't, right? But and there's times when you should lean on your friends, right? Like when you're hurting or when you're, situations like financial situations or whatever. But doing what you can to contribute in a positive way to the world, that's part of it. But I think emotionally, it's like in what was that? What's that film I was talking about in the Saturday Supercast? Dave Roman, The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, where Santa Claus, as a young man, asks the great Ack, this forest spirit, and was like, "What's mankind's purpose? What's he made for?" And the great Ack says, "To leave the world in a condition better than he found it." And I think when your motivations are aligned in that way, boom, you're a grown up. To me, that's my oversimplified way of looking at it, in a very roundabout way of getting there.
No, I wouldn't classify anything of what you were exploring there as like just even like oversimplified. I heard a lot of the like themes of transitioning from being involved a lot with self into being involved with like sort of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And
at least having a sense of it, at least having like an awareness and a concern for it. Because, I mean, I'm not going out and trying to save the world in every conceivable way, right? It's not like when I see, like, there's a news story about something that happened in Spain, and I'm like, I got to get on a plane because I'm a grown-up, and I got to go fix that, right?
Dang it. Something in Spain again. Well, at least I got the frequent flyer miles going on. It's, what's fun? Oh, what was I going to say, too, about the,
a move away from an awareness of self to an awareness of the wider world.
Well, it's I'm sorry, it was actually something silly. It's not like the bad guy in The Crow. Do you remember the original Crow movie?
I haven't seen it since it came out.
Oh wow! Yeah.
You just hit me in a cultural blind spot. What was the bad guy in The Crow about?
Oh gosh, what's funny is I can't remember the actor's name, but he's got a really gruff voice. And in The Crow, he had very long hair. He was dressed very dapper, and he'd carry pointy things or guns a lot. And total bad guy. He said something to the effect, I'm going to misquote it, but like he was recalling a story. I think during like a bad guy gloating moment, right? Of like when he knew that he'd grown up. And it was something to the effect of, I knew I was grown up, and let's see, it's when you know you're going to die or whatever. Anyway, I blew it. I couldn't think of the quote. So yeah, there was that.
So when you know you're gonna die is when you're grown up, according to this guy.
Yeah, exactly. But it's yeah, that was me demonstrating my lack of finesse in recall for some stuff. But you know what? I bet if you check it out on YouTube, you'll laugh then. Anyway, so I feel like you totally nailed that curveball, Jerzy. And it's and it was fun to just do a different thing. So thanks for going along with that.
Yeah, happy to. But like I said, like it's almost as if you designed that to hit one of my pain points because you know this is something I think about a lot. It's like whether or not my decisions are ultimately being helpful and good, and whether or not and being sometimes overly aware of when my own selfish motivation gets entangled in that, and does that muddy the waters? Does that make it bad? Does that make me bad? I sweat that stuff all the time, man. That's why I was making that metaphor about the big sanding wheel.
It's well, that is definitely more of like it sort of was reflex and subconscious, because to tell you the truth, to let you into where I got this, I have a little treasure trove of some curveballs just in case, right? And
for those who are just listening to the audio, Rob literally steepled his fingers as he was saying that.
I did, and I drummed them, and it's like I reached into my just in case pile from and I got them from this set of questions called Table Topics Family. And so it's this cool set of question cards that is meant to be just sort of, you could play it like a family game or just, social gathering kind of thing. And just people will draw a question from this sort of really nice, like sort of plastic faux crystal canister thing that's like a cube. And it's like this little, we pull it off, and there's these nice, thick trivia card-like things. They're kind of squarish, with a question only on one side. And so you pull it out, and you can ask it of, whoever you want or the whole group, and people can share and explore stuff, and it's pretty fun, with all ages.
A way to kickstart a philosophical discussion with your family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So there you go.
Well, do you feel satisfied with the curveball section there?
Feel very satisfied.
I don't know if I did any necessarily any kind of like awesome philosophical or intellectual stretching, but you made me uncomfortable, and that's also part of the curveball.
It is. We have had stretches of curveballs where we purposefully would design them to be hitting each other in our blind spots.
Yeah.
So it's almost like yeah. Anyway, it's obvious it's an exercise, and hopefully those of you listening have found it interesting to play along. And we should give us a shout out as far as if you have any curveballs for us, because once in a while that's happened too. So we love hearing from the leaners, and
I'll tell you what I'm most curious about
yeah.
in terms of that request or that asking for help thing that you just did. I'm curious what they would deduce about us that we wouldn't see ourselves, because for people who have listened to a lot of shows, I've always been surprised by what people deduce about me, like, and how eerily accurate they can be sometimes when I think I'm being pretty cagey, but then they come at me and they say something about like, oh, well, I think Jerzy, you in particular would enjoy this because of this, right? I'm like, wow, yeah, you're spot on. Ow.
It turns out if you provide hundreds of hours of content into the world, there's a lot of us that's in here regardless. I mean, we're a bit reserved. We tend to not, vent in the like oversharey kind of way. It's just, not typically what we do, what have you, but hey, stuff comes out. So yeah, always good. So what's funny is that sounds like that's an invitation where, hey, if you have a question that you think would be extra challenging because of our blind spots that you've observed, go for it.
What we're doing is we're saying, like, when I took Aikido classes years ago, and I remember I had to spar with the instructor. Like we ran out of partners, and so the instructor came over, Sensei came over to me, and was like, well, we're going to spar. I'm like, oh, geez. And I started, swinging at him. and he just wasn't there anymore. He was just gone. I'm like, what happened? And he's like, no, really come at me. Like it was like in the Matrix, like, don't try to hit me, And so I started swinging like with all my might, and every time I was, swinging, he was gone. So it's we want to spar with the sensei.
Yeah, indeed. Sounds fun. And so double extra awesome as far as exploring the curveball and whatnot. Kind of fun. And I would love to let's switch it up. Let's go to our main topic today, Jerzy.
All right. And to do that, we have to go 10,000 feet up, which is where we discuss the topic in abstract, look at it from every conceivable angle, look for all the hidden dimensions and depths, weird shapes, and surprising elements as we think very hard about the topic before we get into talking about it in a more concrete way in the on-the-ground section. So, Rob, the title of this one was what? What do we call this one? Resolving Your Goals System. This was actually born out of a Polytechnic cast that you did recently. You dropped, after we talked about the couple episodes ago, the Art Sound Off Challenge, and said, I don't know if we're going to get back to doing these microcasts or not. We'll see. Rob got back to it, and you did it like, was it the day after Christmas? It's like everybody's on holiday break, but Rob's up working, and not because of any kind of macho thing, but just because he had the fire in his belly. So you dropped a Polytechnic cast. You want to talk about that to frame up the topic?
Yeah, I did. Let's see. I shared an episode that was, so the Polytechnic cast is this journal podcast where I do typically a bit of reflection, and I try to do some like investigation, a little exploration to try to come up with new insights and stuff. And it's into like what I've been making, what have I been thinking about, working on, that kind of stuff. Things I've shipped, whatever. Typically very creative project focused. And this one was about a project that I realized would be just part of my goals for the next year. And so it was like this intertwined topic of both talking about this specific project, but then also the sort of where it came from. I had been doing, I realized that because I participated in Inktober, and then Jerzy came up with the idea for Art Sound Off, and then I did participate in that as well, that for roughly 61 or maybe even some change beyond that days, I had been sharing something publicly daily, which I hadn't done in maybe ever. And I found the experience, certainly challenging, and it stretched me in various ways, in part because of the specific natures of like what I would try to accomplish on some nights with those given projects. But then I realized that there was this other like fueling me benefit that I just felt more creatively charged up from that practice and from that effort. So I came up with a particular goal that I think we could, we might examine a bit later. I called it Creative Heartbeat. And I also thought about, well, goals, and like that goal in particular kind of embodied this that I think I use the word differently than a lot of people do. And I don't think I'm alone, and I've noticed other people that kind of echo a similar theme for their goals. But because when I say it, I don't think I'm evoking a command upon myself or a command upon the universe or whatever. I think of it as this intertwined series of steps and whatnot that I will continue to nurture and explore. That it's a system of activities that will help me bring that thing about. So that idea that goals are systems is where our topic came from.
I think in my attempt to put my own words on what I think you're saying here, or to add like another angle on it, is that when a lot of people, not everybody, but when a lot of people talk about goals, they say, I'm going to take up running, right? Or I'm going to fill a sketchbook, or I'm going to get an agent, or right, whatever kind of like we identify the thresholds, right? This is the prize that I want to get. But what I'm hearing from you is, yeah, I kind of think about that, but I think about all of the pieces that go in between where I am now and where that thing is. And the stuff in between is the important part. Not because if I do it right, I get the prize, but because if I nurture and attend to this thing, then both benefits will happen and unexpected benefits will happen. I did not hear that part in what you were saying, but I'm intuiting that part in what you're saying.
Yeah, because inherently, I think of the just creating, essentially painting yourself a sign, and planting it in the ground or whatever. It's making a proclamation. That's something, and it's not complete to me. And I think for recent years, I've internalized that approach so much that I've taken it for granted. That it's that I thought it'd be interesting to explore it with you, actually, to sort of find different words and unbox it a bit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, one of the things that you said in that Polytechnicast that I remember very clearly is when you started talking about goals, I heard you get a little bit, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but I heard the wariness in what you were saying. Like when you said, like, this is a potential minefield. This is a whole bigger thing that I don't want to get into. This is beyond the scope of this particular episode of the Polytechnicast. And even in the notes, you said goals are problematic. What do you mean when you say that? Is it that you're saying that, well, people, like either you got the willpower or you don't. So, or did I just hit you with one of those needles?
Did.
Acupuncture?
Yes, totally. And it's exactly that situation where I think a lot of people have a lot of expectations and a lot of maybe their own story. Maybe some would have baggage, and some have just any kind of strong feeling, negative or positive, about goals, and how so many people expect some different things out of it. And then as I see the public discourse occur, like on Twitter, and goals are this, goals aren't that, goals are a waste of time, and then people in situations where they're really bummed about their goals, and people who are totally screaming from the top of the mountain that they're about to bungee jump into goals, and all these different positions that exist in the landscape of how people relate to goals, and what do they even mean when they say the word goal. And that's what I mean by, I think it's very problematic. It's divisive. It's when I say it, it can trigger stuff, and it's like, I didn't mean to trigger that. That was hidden. I didn't. Oops.
Yeah. So what can we take a moment, and I hope this isn't too pedantic, but like try to define what you mean when you say the word goal?
I think of a goal is something that embodies change I wish to bring about in myself, to also see some kind of change reflected in the world. And that could just be, it just can take so many forms. Like, that's in general what it is. But then in order to do that, then I feel that a goal is, like, a good way for me to approach goals is that they are a system. So when I create that sort of expectation, like, I would like to see this thing come about. Like, I would like to get to a certain point of fitness physically, or to increase my holistic design skills. That's been a theme, actually, in recent years for me. And then I think about what does that look like, and I get very systemic about it. And so inherently, it's those things. It's a combination where I actually enjoy the proclamation aspect of it. I enjoy that sort of, this is what I believe I can, I'm going to hopefully accomplish. And then here's where I think I'm not just making some random bet with the universe. Here's where I'm stacking the odds in my favor by turning it into a system where I can bring it about.
Some language you use internally when we're discussing the LIA Cast and future shows and projects that we're working on together. I noticed that you'll use this particular piece of language a lot. You prepared us for success with this. Like when I put together the notes for any particular episode. I don't do every episode, but the ones I do, I'll put together the notes, and you'll fire back at me like, this is a great preparation for a successful show, right? That does seem to be something that's kind of imbued into you, is like making the machinery of to get you to the goal actually a more important goal, because getting to the goal, because what you're pointing out is like when you state a goal and you're like, I'm going to take up running, and then Tuesday you don't run, Wednesday you do, but then Thursday, Friday, Saturday you don't. Well, I guess I failed. I failed at this thing. I want to do this thing and I'm not doing it right, so I failed at it. Whereas when you make the goal the machinery to get you to do that thing, you have something to go back on and tweak and refine, because the real goal is getting that working right. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, exactly. And also that that statement of the initial intent is a catalyst to then probably discover additional necessary goals to accomplish that intent. Because if I'm in that circumstance where I'm not running, and I am sometimes running and all that, I need to be creating the feedback loop to be able to make that observation and adjustment. And so if I'm not in the habit of doing the feedback loop, then guess what else I have as a goal? Well, time to get good at observing what I do every day and reflecting on it and all that.
So it's just a matter of setting up in a linear fashion. Step 1, add this, add a feedback loop. Step 2, establish a schedule. Get a smartphone app that'll ping me every day about this. Step 3, right? It's just ABC? Is that how you go about setting up these systems?
Always be goaling. It's not like that. I don't think it's this is the dodgy thing where, honestly, what you described, sure, that can totally work. Honestly, it's a place to start, and chances are you will discover some nuance where that doesn't really fit for your interests, for where you're at, maybe physically, mentally, emotionally, socially. These are some dimensions that I tend to group and organize and slice goals, right?
Well, what I'm driving at here is like, okay, so you're talking about going back and tweaking the system and making the system a series of sub-goals that add up to a major goal to have a good system to help you achieve the thing that you're set out to achieve. You got proclamation, build the machinery. Mm-hmm. Not getting to the proclamation, let's evaluate the machinery. All right, what are things that can inform you? I'm talking about your own experience now. What are things that inform time to fix the machinery? And then is it a matter of time to back to the drawing board and let's start from scratch and rebuild this thing? Or, do you go to different parts of the machinery, the system that you've built, and, kind of zigzag on what parts you adjust, fix, and tweak? So there's two questions there, right?
Yeah.
There's two questions.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding, one of the questions is, how do I notice that, and then what do I do about it?
But basically, that was a very much more elegant way to say what I said.
We do that for each other. And I'm happy, whatever. Anyway, I'm often the recipient of the gift of clarity. So, as you make sense of my jargon. So, let's see. How do I observe it? One of the key things is I try to notice if I'm even showing up to that goal. Is there any percent of me that's ever arriving at giving it my time and attention? And then if that's not happening, then there's something more fundamental going on, where perhaps it's not important, or perhaps I'm avoiding it for whatever reason. And I need to explore that. sometimes it's almost like there's am I goal journey ready? You know what I mean? Like if I'm down or stressed or tired or too stretched, I may not be working on some of the really harder goals. And I may not be working on any, and then that's when I would need to be. That hasn't happened in quite some time, but like when I think about, I've had some kind of goal system for quite a long time now. So, this is the current version I'm using right now, but many years ago, I think it was more trying to be the the basics, where I would go buy Anthony Robbins books and crap like that, where I'm dismissive of it now, but like it actually has a really valid place and time for people if it's at the right place and time for people who need it. And that's like super basic, right? It's almost like, how do I focus if I'm not nourishing myself well, right? And so if I'm at least getting past the basic threshold, then I'll start asking, like, it typically means that, like, I misjudged and I need to somehow go through that planning process again. And but if I am showing up and there's something more subtle missing, am I going anywhere down the path that you were hoping to
Yeah. No,
okay.
you're covering it. You're covering it, I think, very, very well. As you're talking about, sometimes it does require scrapping the entire thing. Other times it'll be dependent on what am I noticing that I'm not attending to, and then asking yourself, why am I not attending to it? Is it environmental? Is it that, oh, I'm sick this week? I'm feeling a little bit ragged around the edges and I'm not attending to it because of that? Is it because I'm procrastinating? Is it like, oh, not that again? All right, time to ask yourself, why am I saying, oh, not that again? Is it because it's not important to the system? Or is it that I am feeling what Pressfield calls the resistance, or just general reluctance, or laziness? Laziness is a real thing that we all feel, right? And it's one of those words that gets a lot of cocked eyebrows, but I mean, I think it's part of the human experience. Right? It's like, actually, I want to go on to something about laziness just for a second there. One of the things that is one of my bugbears is when people harp on our desire for convenience a little too harshly, because isn't that like what drives most innovation, is when a human being says there's got to be a better way? It's like, we can't beat on laziness too much because it drives us to do some pretty awesome things sometimes.
It totally does. And it's in fact, when you, this is funny because I love to harp on things such as cognitive biases and logical fallacies, but like they help us too. Like one of the reasons they exist and are so like spread and like well it's they are part of a system as well. So if you how does human cognition work, and how do these different misperceptions continue to persist and whatnot? In some ways, they have somehow contributed to our survival, right? Where having what's the fear of loss one, sunk cost fallacy, and that really can help you scrimp and save in tough times. Like having that as a bias could totally serve some goals. I mean, depending on what goals you're trying to do. If you're trying to now make new things happen, that bias is super tough or that will be hard to bring about new things. It's really good at preserving things, right? Anyway, but so even those, like I vilify them in some ways in how we chat, right? And I don't mean to be purely vilifying them, because even they have a use.
And you almost anticipated where I wanted to go next with this, because like I think about some of the language I'm hearing you use a lot, both on the Polytechnic Cast and now, and in the writing you've done on the subject, is you're constantly examining motivation. One of the things that I think it's I don't want to mischaracterize anything, but when you make a goal a proclamation, and leave it as simple as that, it feels like it's leaving out a careful examination of why you want to do it, right? I'm going to start running. Well, why? Because running is healthy. Okay, well, are there other healthy things that you could be doing that might be more suited to you, right? Have you fully examined all that? What in particular about this goal is so good? Like I think about well, I'm just gonna get an agent. Well, why? Because an agent will help me sell books. How? Why them? What? Have you thoroughly thought this through to where that is the one particular way into getting your book sold that you want to go, right? Is this an informed decision, or is this just a sort of a knee jerk? Well, that would be a good thing. I'm
It's
not
so
saying
interesting.
that
That's a really neat example. So it just comes to mind how you could, in that exploration, you may find that you kind of like representing yourself, and that may be a hard trade-off. Or you may find that like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea because of I've just got a lot to learn on the negotiation side of things, or whatever. Or maybe it's somewhere in between where like, you know what, I need to get an agent that's going to share their process with me because I want to make sure I'm picking up some of these things, you know? Anyway, I mean, that's just by exploring it. All of a sudden you've created a strongly different flavored goal.
and I don't want anybody to misunderstand to say that I'm suggesting that making a proclamation means you're being thoughtless. I'm just saying that on paper that thought isn't documented any place, right? And your careful evaluation of systems sort of forces you to go back and examine all of your motivations for everything, right? So I'm just
And it's like in a proper amount of, it's giving it a proper amount of respect and diligence, considering like how much life effect you probably are expecting out of goals, right? If you want something to have that much change and significance, then it's probably worth examining it to make sure that it can live up to that. And in the examination, you're probably going to make it better. You will likely find ways where all of a sudden you've enhanced it and nourished it to be like even better suited for what you were trying to accomplish.
the Boulder and Fleet comics format is entirely a result of me doing that examination. Right, when I said, because I had a long spin up cycle to doing it, so like over that time I said, well, what do I want to do with this thing? What do I want it to achieve? System, making a comic weekly. What are the expected outcomes? What are the like the hoped the things I hope will happen, and the things that I feel pretty certain that are going to happen, right? Like shipping a comic weekly, I know I'm going to get better at drawing, right? That's an expected outcome. That I can just count on that happening. But things I hope will happen. All right, let's examine the things I hope will happen. And then I said, well, why do I want those to happen and not this to happen? And then in carefully thinking all that through, it led me to this conclusion of, oh, it needs to be square. It needs to be easily read on the phone because I want to prepare it for success in this particular arena. So when my initial thought was, no, I'm going to do it like standard 10 by 15 page size because that's the way comics are after all,
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, so your goal had those assumptions initially. You questioned them, and like, was there some key? What was like the key discovery?
The key discovery for me is that based on my own experimentation, posting things online for the past couple years, is that I noticed that anytime I posted something with an image attached, even if there was a link to something else, if I had an image with it, it always got more interaction than if it was just a link. Even if it had a preview image, like a lot of these different social sites, if you post on Google Plus or Facebook and you post a link, it'll give a preview image underneath it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I actually post a JPEG, so do it as a photo post with a link to something else, it always got better interaction. And even strangely enough, like I'd post Lean Into Art casts or like Comics Are Great episodes and I'd post the YouTube video, it gets some interaction. But if I posted just an image related to the content with a link to the video, it always got more interaction. Okay, so observation. Images, natively embedded images in social media gets more interactivity based on my own experimentation. This isn't just from some Guy Kawasaki article. This is a real thing that I tested myself. All right, so whatever I do, it has to be embeddable on all the different avenues that I want to try to reach out to people. Observation B, and this is purely anecdotal. I have only my personal, personal experience to back this up, But in teaching children for the last couple of years, I noticed that they're not on Facebook. Like I'm talking about kids under 12. So that's the audience I'm trying to reach with Boulder and Fleet, right? I want those kids to read it. I've already stated that a difficulty in putting comics online for kids is that kids don't go looking for web comics online. They go to YouTube. And the other thing I observed is they go to Instagram. All these kids are, for some reason, they're all on Instagram, but they're not on Facebook. They're not on Twitter. They don't care about those networks at all. But they love Instagram. They love taking pictures of themselves and sharing those pictures with their friends, kind of thing. All right. Instagram's the platform where I have the best chance of reaching my intended audience. And images that are complete and not just like a preview image, because getting people to click a link is very difficult when we're getting a sea of links spread at us. So those are the observations, those are the thinking that I did to lead me to the inevitable format that I landed on for the comic.
You pointed out that's super awesome and interesting, right? That someone else with that goal, in a way, could take that as rote advice, maybe a step-by-step thing, right? Bringing it back to that, but also something else you pointed out along the way that I think kind of puts an interesting big distinction right there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are just looking to start out and adopting like a checklist or someone else's thing that really sounds like it's what you want to do, you're following your inspiration, you make the proclamation to do that thing, what have you. I am not campaigning against that. I am saying that like that could be a good beginning, yet you would probably find something deeper in that goal by exploring it. And you mentioned something really cool, like by having firsthand observations. That's the difference, where it's like, oh, that sounds really cool, I'm excited, and I will proclaim something along that path where I want to make my own webcomic, or I want to do my own Instagram webcomic, or etc. But then testing it yourself gives you the deeper insights that nothing else can, basically. I think that's a really...
And testing it once you're executing it as well to go back and refine, because one thing I didn't expect was that I was going to get a better uptake on the comic posting it on Tapastic than on other networks. It's like, well, of course it's going to do better here because that's where everybody is, and then I'll post it on Tapastic too, just to be on the safe side. And then lo and behold, wow, I'm getting a lot of interaction from people there. And then also, I mean, there was other environmental factors that led to this, like me saying, like, what can I manage? What have I proven to myself in the past that I can manage? Well, how much bandwidth do I got for this thing? That also informed it as well. Right? So there's a lot of factors. There's like, self-knowledge. There's, understanding what your limitations are, doing some experimentation, like you said, to amass whatever kind of firsthand data you can amass about this, and then coming up with your own plan based on that. So like these recipes that other people put out there, I think are terrific as a basis for meditation and as a starting point. But all of their assumptions, like you said, should be tested by you. Not to disprove, not to go onto Twitter and say, like, aha, Mr. Kawasaki, I got you wrong here. But to say, like, oh, okay, well, he had a really great way of framing it up. How can I take this and modify it to make it my own?
Exactly. I mean, so he's expressing something with a bold stance of that works for him, which is awesome, right?
Yeah.
I mean, which is what all of us are doing, which is what we are doing, Jerzy and I, right now. And
exactly,
yeah, that's you can't get as lean into art as we're getting right now. This is the ceiling of recursive questioning has been hit. So.
We've hit peak recursive questioning. Okay, so can we talk about what your goals are for 2015 then, and how you think about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I categorize my goals in a couple of ways, and this is going to be an incomplete. I'm not doing a step 1, 2, 3, ABC, whatever, as far as exactly how I come up with them. But like to give a general flavor, I like to have essentially 2 layers to my system, primarily where. I've got a set of goals that are like they're more strategies or themes, and then I have the more specific ones that fall underneath those that help me bring about that thing that the strategy is advocating for in like specific instances. So, for instance, like one of my theme strategies. What's so funny is like I literally like came up with these. These are from last night, so this is work in progress, right? But in that sort of summary that I come up with in a process I've mentioned before, where it's something that I do with my wife, and we're working on involving our daughters, and we put these goals on like these sort of summarized ones on a giant Post-it note, and it's like part of our like holiday rituals. Anyway, and yeah, and so a couple of them on this thematic level are keep making things I believe in anywhere I am, and leave space, improvise, and be present, committed in the moment.
Those are like general alignment goals.
Yeah.
Align myself in this way so as to react and engage in ways that I feel good about myself when I do that. That's what I'm hearing there.
Yeah. And in part, it's like they're general patterns that I may have been trying already in prior years. Totally have to do a quick side note there. So prior years is a component of goals. Being able to have captured and being able to reflect on stuff you tried is an amazing asset toward chilling the hell out a little bit when it comes
No,
to...
Rob, it's about putting the past you out to pasture. Goodbye 2014. You sucked chunks. Get out of here. I never want to see you again, right? Oh, don't look at my old work. It's garbage. I hate it when people see my old work because I was so bad back then, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and I'm not making fun of anybody who does that. What I'm saying is I'm pointing out the flaw in that kind of reasoning is you're throwing out valuable information.
And without keeping it for examination, you're probably going to do it again. Hey, I'm not Nostradamus here, but likely observing the patterns and long enough before they're chucked is the hidden thing that you're throwing out the candy bar and the wrapper all at once by doing that.
That's going to be my disclaimer for everything from now on. I'm not Nostradamus here.
So,
but yes, you're right. The past is, reflecting on what, God, we talk about this all the time on the show, but I think it still needs underlining with a crayon is, critiquing and evaluating what you did in the past, both good and bad, is a great data point for evaluating the system that you're setting up for your goals in the future. Like I said, with the webcomic, part of it was establishing what kind of bandwidth do I have? And I did not know for sure what kind of bandwidth I had until I spent a couple years with David Say's Emergent Task Planner, which taught me a lot about what I can actually accomplish in the day. And when I had all that stuff recorded in those notebooks of this is what I did that day and this is how I spent my time, okay, now I have a really good intuitive sense based on that information of what I can actually pull off, right?
Absolutely, because now you've gathered your own sort of evidence of like your patterns, like where are your strengths, right? What have you been able to bring about on the general level when you're looking at your goals, and then the Emergent Task Planner is an amazing data source.
I recommend. I mean, this is one thing where I will make like a big statement, a big bold statement. Is I do recommend that everybody who does art or visual freelancing, some kind of side creative project, you don't have to institutionalize it into your life as a daily thing, but using it just for a while. Pick a period. Like for these 3 months, I'm going to use it, and then going back and reviewing it because I don't use it daily anymore. And we'll talk about that in the on the ground section, like what tools I do use. But the experience I had with it was profoundly informative. I learned so much about what my bandwidth is from that thing.
Couple things worth mentioning. So we've covered thematically. So now this is like a nested side note within a side note. We've mentioned so you're talking about your exploration of the Boulder and Fleet project and sort of how that came about. It's reminding me of our Passion Projects episode, where that is all about where we explored sort of the how do you form a iteratively evolving business endeavor, right? We talked about some of the minimum viable product pattern and all that stuff in there. We've talked to Dave Say multiple times. Worth checking those out. Those are definitely very reflective, planful episodes. Also, the back in the day when Jerzy started jumping into Emergent Task Planner, that was in the time episode, I believe. Yeah, and no idea how I'm even remembering that, but
that is crazy because that is a long time ago.
Yeah.
But we'll put together
a bundle of themes. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put together a list of follow-up episodes that we've recorded in the past on this topic. Because also I'm thinking of the one I did with Brandon Dayton about called Webcomics, To Whom Are You Committing? Because we explored motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic motivation a lot in that episode, which is kind of what we're talking about here too.
Absolutely. And
but
let's see. I think
back to your goals.
Back out of the nesting. So, all right. So I've got these. I mentioned a couple of general category goals, for example, and then some examples that are more of like I think of them as the projects that help me accomplish that general thematic intent. And one of those examples is to be more than a patron. I found it really pretty easy to, from time to time, support artists and projects where like I buy their stuff, or I'll be a patron on Patreon or what have you. But something that I want to engage in more is just happily owning publicly the things that I think are wonderful creations and celebrating the people who make that too. So
I love the way you frame that up, Rob. I mean, that goes back to the curveball, actually. You found a way to tie this all together, so even the curveball ties into the main episode. Is what you've done there is you've said, this isn't about you got to go out and promote the things that you like, otherwise they'll go away, or like it's just a good thing to do to help your bros out and give them a thumbs up publicly. But you're pointing out that you're thinking about the wider world, and it's good for you and it's good for them to celebrate it. It's not promotion, it's celebration, and it's you publicly thanking them in a way that is also beneficial to them because it also spreads the word.
And it's encouraging and ties into their extrinsic feedback loops and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Because people aren't just doing this for the money; they're also doing it because they love it, and so they want to see that it changed someone's life. And how do they see that? Unless someone shares it.
That is yeah. I mean, it's like the sentence you wrote in the notes is so great. It's like, hello and thanks for making this. Like basically posts contrived to express that idea. Hello, @link person. You made this thing. It made me happy. I'm letting other people know about that, right? As a thank you for making this thing.
Yeah. And so incidentally, it is advocacy and it is promotion incidentally, but it's really the celebration is the emphasis there because of I think it will help other creator in some small way. I'm not saying it's like, and now I'm going to start the creator celebration parade and it will be the source of all acknowledgement.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. My next question was like, how do you measure this? How do you measure whether or not you're being successful in this goal?
I will have to find out if I'm getting some sort of acknowledgement from that where it's like, thanks. So there's a little quick, glad you like it, whatever kind of things that come back from it. And I haven't fully thought this through. Like this one is not fully a system yet. So, but this is the kind of goal, like like a project style goal that should have that kind of, and I think, like once we hit the ground and go into more detail, I'll break down like some of the things I try to have present in any of those sort of project focused goals. But that one's not a system yet, but it's it's a sketch in progress. I feel good about that one. I think it's going to stick on my list, but yep, got to explain.
All right, well, let's talk about the creative heartbeat, which is what you started talking about in the Polytechnicast. This particular goal.
Now, that may be. How about we hit that on the ground?
Okay, we can do that on the ground.
Or we can jump around, but that's
no, that's fine.
Yeah, because I think it's a good example to help break down all those details. And then I'm actually super curious about your goals for 2015.
Yeah,
and
and
your style of sharing them too. Like,
okay, yes, because my style is different than yours. Although
mhm.
while we share very similar biases and we come from a lot of the same kind of thinking styles, I
Mm.
know that my way of approaching this is not the same as yours. Um, and I haven't had a whole lot of time to think it through yet. Have not sat down to have like a goal setting session or a goal discussion session uh, with Anne, and I know we need to. But I mean, I've got like a few that are sort of like already baked in from the end of this past year. One is that I'm going to try to ship at least one page of the Boulder and Fleet webcomic every week for the year 2015. I don't know if I'm going to do that, and I don't have a system in place for this, except for setting myself up to succeed in the sense of setting aside 4 hours a week to do it. Right.
Yeah.
But there's some potential monkey wrenches that are built into that with the fact that I'm kind of writing it on the fly. I've outlined the entire story. I've got like a sense of like this is where everything's gonna go and these are the major points I gotta hit. But I don't have every scene written out. So like I'm getting to the point in my page drawing buffer where it's like, oh, I'm running out of thumbnails. I better figure out exactly what happens next, right? So there's gonna be points where I'm gonna have to figure out a way to uh I guess I don't know do I need to trust myself that I'm going to be able to pull it off, or do I need to better prepare myself for success with that? That's something that needs evaluation, right?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I don't think there's a like a direct one better than the other thing. Obviously, whatever you need to do to prepare yourself to pull it off. But the problem is like it sounds like you're drawing from the same resource pool, right? So the 4 hours, right?
yeah,
That's to me the interesting resource choke point. Um, so
right. That is. I mean that's a real scarcity that I have there. Is I've
mhm.
got that 4 hours. That's all I'm giving to myself, and I can't abuse that, right? Um, and I guess as a system, it does have some ways to sort of prepare me for success in the sense that it doesn't allow me to indulge myself, right? Like I can when I detect myself becoming self-indulgent and saying like, no, this needs a little bit more flourish and a little bit more work. I got to noodle with. Nope, put it down, keep going. You don't get a chance to overthink this, right? Um, which realigns me with the machinery of shipping the thing,
Mhm.
right? And then another goal that I set, which is actually probably part of the machinery of the Boulder and Fleet webcomic, is I started live streaming my process of making the pages, right? So it occurred to me that what's the harm in letting people watch me while I draw? And I know that if people are watching me, I'm going to stay on task. I'm going to be more committed to this thing, and I don't I don't want to spend more than an hour to an hour and a half streaming something on the internet, right? I don't want to have a 4 hour streaming session. So it kind of time boxes my coloring and my inking on the pages, right? So like I did 2 streams of so far of me coloring the book, one of me inking, and in both instances it kind of motivated me to work faster. Um, that's the is that the intrinsic motivation? It's helping my productivity. It's keeping me on task. And then the extrinsic motivation is that also that, oh, hey, you know what? When you stream the comic live, people walk by the stream. When I'm streaming on Google Plus, they see it in their feed, like, hey, this is a live stream where somebody's drawing in Manga Studio 5. I like Manga Studio 5. Let's check it out. And they discover the comic. And I actually saw an uptick in subscribers after doing some live streams. That was not in my motivation set, but this is one of the other things that maybe is worth cataloging, is that other benefits come out of creating systems for your goals, unexpected benefits, right?
Well, you're pointing out something that I mean, it's probably an episode in and of itself, or it just sort of naturally pops up. But there's like these techniques that are well vetted, that have certain qualities that can really fit in how you deliver upon goals. And so you mentioned, uh, I, I, I kind of I consider your scheduling the creative sessions as this live stream event is in a way a, a creative performance, and that does inherently increase the commitment wrapped around the task, and it adds more time boxing around it. It has probably some taxing aspects to it, or some distractions or whatever. But I'm guessing in the trade off that by having the intense focus and the commitment, it's sort of it's a good productivity technique, basically.
Basically, yeah. I mean, because it is a challenge to make creative choices when you know people are watching you, right? So, like in the most recent one that I did, I was having a real devil of a time figuring out the shadow technique on one of the characters, and you can watch it in the video. You can see me go, "Oh, let's try this. Nope, let's try that. Nope, let's try." And the whole time, I know people are watching while I'm fudging with this, and when I'm working alone in my studio, that's the moment I can put down the tablet and walk away and just like stop, take a break, think about it, then come back to it. But I felt this demand to figure it out now, which can sound almost suffocating. But what I found was it was just distracting enough that it let me let go of that preciousness that I sometimes fall victim to and just find a solution that does the job so I can walk away from it and keep shipping. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I'm trying to look up a Dan Mishkin quote.
Oh. Does this remind you of
Deadlines are
something?
good unless you die from them. Um, and yeah, exactly. Like that kind of it's not exactly a deadline. Like a deadline is another productivity technique to draw upon. You're talking about performance, right? In my opinion, that sounds like as I'm cataloging what you're describing, I'm like, yep, that's going under performance. Maybe the creative session for some of the things that I work on, maybe performance is the right way to get the product done or whatever.
And obviously, I couldn't do that with every part of the creative part or the creative process of this book.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm writing, how could I possibly live stream that and do a good job of either, right? But I found the particular part of the process, like okay, coloring and inking, those are things I can do, and I can still talk to people while I do them. Those are the parts that I'll actually get to share with people. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
penciling too. Maybe I haven't gotten to any pages where I feel like I'd be comfortable sharing the penciling, but who knows?
Cool.
Yeah, those are two of my big ones. I mean, I've got other goals on the list, but I don't know if it's time to go on the ground and talk in more detail about this. Is this a part where because I was kind of like loosey goosey hitting at the difference between what you were describing as intrinsic and extrinsic motivations.
Yeah. I think that yeah, let's chat about motivation before we hit on the ground, and because it is kind of like this high level concept. It's like you're uh, thinking about your goals, like thinking about like maybe there's some hidden goals within there that like, oh, really, in order to get this running thing going, I've got to wake up earlier to be able to make the time because I can't budget for it in my current schedule, how it flows or whatever. But that questioning can also lead to like, well, why am I doing this? And this is where some goals are just a support mechanism for other goals. And not just because they're dependent on one another, where like this project needs these different phases, and so in a way there's separate goals or whatever, but more in that like my creative heartbeat is an example. Getting if you have sort of dietary or fitness based goals, I mean those are like more foundational things that somehow give you the capacity to work on the other stuff, because I know that like just to characterize this, like what do we even mean by the motivation too? Because we'll probably look into more specific examples in a few minutes, but like intrinsic motivation, we keep talking about that. What does that mean? It's stuff you do that is automatically rewarding. I think another way to describe it is an autotelic task, something that is like if you find, like we talked about the concept of flow before, those the getting into that state involves a lot of your internal wiring feeling like it's fully on. So like you're deep into a task and it's a challenging enough task, and it's you are not let's say you're not completely beyond the challenge, but you're totally up for the challenge, and and then you disappear into it for a while, right? Like that's all stuff that's essentially internally rewarding. There's nothing in the outside world that can cause well, wait, nope, I'm not an expert on that. I don't know, because actually there's a little bit of that kind of feedback that can happen in video games. It's kind of extrinsic, right? Where if you're getting the sort of good job mechanism that you're really tied into that, well, it's possible to get some flow going that way too. But mostly, like, intrinsic is internal, your desire to improve kind of stuff.
Okay. And so then extrinsic means not inside you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's really internal, external. That's the long and short of it. But external is it's not inherently bad, right? I mean, you need to make money to pay the rent and whatnot. I mean, this externally motivating things are a necessity. But then when you reduce everything down to the external rewards and external punishments, I think you're missing out on an entire dimension of like why you would care about doing stuff. Maybe because you just love it. And that sort of, this rewards like how you believe in a thing. And that's worth tying your goals to that as well. And maybe even mixing them, right? Where knowing that extrinsic isn't inherently bad, it's just incomplete. And because if you only did, how could you do something of service and have a maintainable business if you weren't getting that external feedback of like the happy clients and people enjoying whatever you're serving and giving you recognition for that? So,
yeah, and I think of, like, if you wanted to flip it, you can tell when somebody's just doing it for the money, right? Like when you see like a creative work where you can tell that the artist's heart was not into it, right?
Yeah, so in sometimes out of necessity, doing getting business or contracts that you're not really fully into, right? I think a lot of us have been there.
Yeah.
You need to get a paycheck. So yeah, just some context and thinking about how do you, a lot of the goals we're characterizing here deal with like, creative output and, how do you, when you examine them, I don't know, that's a little bit of sharpening some tools in the toolbox, basically, of the motivation angle. Anyway.
Well, cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Are we ready to go on the ground then? I think we examined that pretty
so.
Thoroughly. All right. Well, then with that, the ominous music plays. I picked this music in particular because this is Zentradi's ships descending upon Earth. About to go to ground. On the ground, where we talk about the topic in a way of like, how do we put this into action? How do you and I in particular, Rob, how do we put it into action? And then people can take that as a basis meditation and do their own experimentation and build their own methods out of it, right?
Exactly. Throw this out and do your own thing. Podcast over.
It's not that simple, and you know it.
No, it's nice to look at examples and be able to decompose them and recompose them in ways that make sense for you.
Okay, so let's talk about Creative Heartbeat now. Let's talk about the unblocking project, because this is an interesting thing that you just started doing in the last, what, week, 2 weeks?
Yeah, exactly. This is one of those goals where I thought, if I really believe in this, I'm not waiting till the first of the year. So I just started it, and it's not totally finished and figured out as a goal system or whatnot. But it's definitely a very systemic kind of goal. Um, and the project that I have that represents that is unblocking, and what I have there is a daily commitment to just ship a drawing and maybe a little bit about it, and it can be, actually, it doesn't even have to be a drawing. It just has to be some kind of visual creation posted and daily. And the reason being is that I want to feel what I think, and here's my assumption, right, is that I feel like I was more creatively on during the daily creative challenges of Inktober and of Art Sound Off. It was definitely taxing, and it took capacity to do those things. Yet they felt very recharging and energizing as well. So I'm curious to observe over time, like, how is this going to go if I'm putting something out every day? And yeah, and especially as I just did recently, I've fallen into the sort of, like, there's flow. Flow is a sweet spot, and you can go beyond it, right? So you're playing a game, and it's just really great, and it's just magical, and it seems to be wonderful as you progress through it. But all of a sudden, it's not anymore, and that could be because, like, something is maybe it's become too easy, right? So you've now entered the mode where you've progressed far enough in, like, a role playing game or whatever, where nothing can touch you. Then you probably aren't going to be in flow anymore because there's no more challenge. And the other side of that is when you hit a difficulty wall, and I tend to experiment with things that put up difficulty walls. So, yeah, I've already done something that's a bit beyond what I would say this was the intended scope, but I'll keep experimenting.
So, when you say a variety of topics, a variety of visual creations,
Mm-hmm.
my gut says, like, that makes it even more bandwidth intensive, because then it becomes a daily hunt for what's the thing that I'm going to make. Whereas if you put more restrictions on it, then at least every day I'm going to ship X. But one of the things I've been noticing about the blog is, like, you'll post, here's a bunch of drawings of shoes. Mm-hmm. Here's a bunch of drawings of skulls, right? What are you doing to make you aware of what's the thing that you're going to capture? Do you have anything that you've set up so far, or things that you've discovered for, like, is it just going to say, like, like writing prompts? Or...
Oh, right. Yeah, I've generated many drawing prompts.
Okay.
And it turns out one of the topics I haven't shared this publicly, but I've realized that the facial expressions topic might not have a bottom. So I'll probably put a stop on it. But basically, I've generated probably, I don't know, a couple hundred topics, and then I thought, okay, I'm good. I'll have this well to draw upon, and any one of these topics, there's going to be many things to draw and explore with it, like shoes. I wanted to make sure I had some variety of, big shoes, small shoes, women's shoes, men's shoes. And that was a couple days, no problem. But yeah.
So the goal is the practice, though. The goal is to set aside the time every day to do a thing, and it's not to say, like, by March I will have this many drawings, or by March I will have this many fans, or by March I will have these kind of new opportunities open up as a result of me doing this thing on a daily basis. What you've said is the goal is make sure that I construct a way where I have the bandwidth and capacity to do a visual thing every day, where I find that capacity every day.
And if it's not much capacity, I know I can do something. And I'm actually excited about so many different forms of visual expression and even drawing, right? Just pick drawing. I love abstract doodles. I love system flows. I love just sort of outlined pen work. I love scratchy things in pen work. I mean, I'm not going to run out of fun stuff to try. And it's what's funny. This is such a goal to for nourishment that I'm just excited about it. Where I know that there's something about me where I am incredibly pleased when I'm drawing, and that I want to experience every day. And then as a byproduct of it, I know I'll have interesting byproducts. And that's where I'm going to get probably, into trouble from time to time, but I'll get myself out of trouble. And yeah. Like the facial expressions one, I've outlined like many facial expressions, and even doing like 12 a day. I don't know. Yeah. It might keep going. So that one is a little beyond the capacity I intended. Anyway, that's the one I was mentioning before. And anyway, it's a nourishment practice, and it's very much like Brandon Dayton mentioned in a blog post a while back about how he approaches his drawing practice. It's not exactly the same. I think I would love to actually incorporate some of that into my experiments and sessions, where Brandon he's got the sort of accuracy dojo practice, and that is so cool. For me, it's more technique and topic and play, but then definitely I love the challenge. So we'll see. It's a fun experiment that I'll make sure I keep it fun. Anyway.
And that we didn't even say where people can find it. It's at interactive-storyteller.com/unblocking, right?
Yeah. What that also is referring to is a theme that comes up a lot during our podcast, where I go for long periods of time where I don't tweet that much. I don't share things that publicly, and it's not about just going hi, remember me. It's that there is a lot of reason to partake in that exchange. It's like just showing up to the community and saying, hey, what's up? So it's a heartbeat for a lot of things.
That's a great metaphor for it. Is that you're keeping the heart beating rather than letting it? To continue the metaphor and dig it a little deeper, it's like when you let it go, then you have to resuscitate it. You have to do CPR on it, and it's usually not a very pretty thing to witness or experience, right?
The weirdest posts I've experienced, and I've seen lots of people do it, myself included, is when people have been absent for a while, and it's I haven't been around and whatever kind of post. Yeah. Blog posts, tweets, anything, and not the worst kind of thing, but I know if I'm doing that, I'm really kind of stuck. And so I would or blocked. So
yeah, and you do see a lot of people do it. I mean, myself included. When you say sorry, I haven't posted in a while, but right, that's a good signal to pay attention to. I think that's great. Any others? Any other systems that you've been working on in regards to this, or is everything pretty nascent right now because you just went through your planning session for the year?
It's nascent. I'm glad you asked about resources to support it, right? Like unblocking. As far as systems for other goals, totally nascent, work in progress. But they will be of this kind of nature when they're specific, serving one of those themes. So yeah, and that can be the kinds of things that I create are like, if I need so it's like you mentioned, like the some of the requirements for Boulder and Fleet to keep on a schedule, it's it really depends on, more than the visual art execution, right? And the sort of the visual storytelling that is emphasizing the, visual stuff, visual composition, all that. The writing is visual as well, but like,
Sure.
I mean, so what I might do is try to so goals like unblocking help me generate stuff, right? I'll be generating stuff for other projects too as I do this. They might become goals next year, where I will be set up with raw materials to better execute on those goals.
Well, I like how here's another thing I want to shine a light on is you've set up by making the explicit goal for yourself to establish a practice. You've left open whether any other positive benefits will come of this. You haven't said to get better at drawing. Establish a practice to get people to react to me in X, Y, or Z way. Establish a practice to sharpen my ballpoint pen inking skills, right? You've left all that out. You just said, let's establish a practice. And knowing that this is going to go under review. I mean, here we can talk about David Say again. David Say has that wonderful Groundhog's Day resolution system that he set up where you check in on the same number day of each number month throughout the calendar year. So the first day is February 2nd, then March 3rd, then April 4th, May 5th, and so on. And he chronicles all this on his blog at davidsay.com. You are leaving yourself open for check-ins to say, okay, what am I noticing? What feedback am I getting? What are some unintended outcomes? And how can that help me refine the goal? To say, to establish a practice, to do what? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely geared to have stuff emerge from it that I'm purposefully not being prescriptive about. So what about you, Jerzy? Like some kind of like how are you shaping your systems around your goals?
Well, as I said in the 10,000 foot up section, one of my big goals for 2015 is to ship a page of Boulder and Fleet a week for a year, which is not going to be easy because as I look at the calendar, I know I've got Kids Read Comics in the spring. I'm hopefully going to be going to ALA Annual in the summer. The Toronto Comics Arts Festival, TCAF, I'm going to that in, when is that? Is that in March? So I've got a trip to Toronto that I've got to do, and then hopefully another one in the fall. So, more than usual traveling for me. I've got a couple book pitches out that I'm waiting to hear back on. Any day now, I could either hear yay or nay, and I gotta have loose knees in the ship for that, right? Because if it's yay, that's terrific, but it means I'm gonna be exceedingly busy. If it's nay, then now I gotta scramble to find a way to make more money. So there's a lot of question marks there, but I have to leave that time for whatever I do. Like the time for paying work has to remain intact, right? The Boulder and Fleet stuff can't encroach on that. I cannot count on making money off of Boulder and Fleet because I have no system set up for that yet. So okay, what's the challenge? Challenge is managing bandwidth and finding a way to, as you pointed out, execute the comic beyond just the drawing. Make it something worth reading, not just something worth looking at. It's up to the audience to determine whether or not I've done either of those things. But from my own sense of this is something I like looking at, this is something I like reading, right? From my own sense of satisfaction. So how do I do that? How do I find, again, that minimum viable product? And the system I've set up for that is getting that 4-hour block and not counting on it existing in 4 consecutive hours. Know that those 4 hours are going to be spread across the week. Have myself mentally prepared for that. Be ready to engage with it wherever I am, whenever I find that time. Right? So that's sort of like when you talked about like doing something that is in support of the goal. A goal in support of the goal is to maintain an alert readiness to work on it and not work on it in distress or panic. Right? 'Cause that's a story that you hear a lot from people. It's like, oh my God, it's update night. I got to hurry up and scratch this thing out, which can be a great motivator. But I don't want that to be the mental state I exist in for all of 2015. I know that's not good for me. I'm not going to feel good about it, and I will stop enjoying making the comic, because right now I'm in that sweet golden spot where not many people are reading it, so I don't feel like a whole lot of eyes are on me. So I get to do exactly what I want without any fear of consequence, and I'm thinking about it all the time. I'm just all I'm thinking about is that bear and that bird, and I'm really happy whenever I'm working on them. So instead of like anxiety of like where's the audience, it's more like I know this is that quiet moment before audience happens, and then I start kind of stressing out about audience, right?
It's so wild. There's something weird and cool, but also challenging about webcomics as a project and as a goal, because instead of you're doing product development in public, and it's not like the private thing that was pitched and purchased and then will become a publicly known thing when there's demand generation occurring as the product is getting marketed. But like, yeah, that does add a lot of tension to webcomics.
Yeah, I mean, and it can happen. Wonderful things can come out of that. I mean, I know I've told the story before about like when I was serializing the front online. I did write it entirely in advance. I had the whole thing thumbnailed before I set pen to paper, because, again, this is where I want to grant my mid-20s self some credit, is that I was trying to prepare myself for success. I knew that, one of my weak spots is following through on something all the way to the end and have it all work together. I had tried lots of different kinds of comics in the past, and I would hit a stumbling block and the comic would just end. I didn't want that to happen again. Let's set up a system. All right, we're going to make it so that when you're shipping the webcomic, all you're thinking about is drawing it well. Let's offload all that other stuff about writing everything and do that for 2 years in advance, right? But when the comic was updating, readers started asking me very interesting questions that I didn't think to ask about the story. So scenes were written after the fact. Like when somebody asked a certain kind of question, like, what about this, this, and this? I said, oh gosh, I never addressed that. Time to write a new scene that'll get inserted in chapter 5 or chapter 6 or whatever, right? So yeah, it's product development with the audience, which can be super cool, but it can also be very distressing, because then you think, you get like something happens where maybe you have an intended payoff. Like, this is going to make sense in chapter 6, but right now people are going to be a little upset about it, and you start getting a lot of feedback where people are saying, I don't get it, I don't like it anymore, and then it can make you question, is this even a good idea, this setup to this payoff, right? It can make you question the work. So right now I'm in that wonderful place where I'm not thinking about that at all, and hopefully that attitude will continue even if an audience is found. I don't know. I won't know until I get there. If I get there, because I'm also bracing myself for that. I could do this thing, and 20 people could wind up loving it, but the rest of the world doesn't give a darn. I'm accepting that as a possibility.
You mentioned there's so many complexities with that, but as far as your primary audience and whatnot too, right? There's like the product development, some of it will be incurring in front of them, but they're not a simple audience at any level as far as interacting with on the web, for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's just a lot of logistics, and good protections and whatnot, and well, it's probably necessary that, for instance, it's not legal to market to children under 12, right? So yeah, I mean, it has to be incidental, and things like Minecraft happen and blow up with that audience, and it's clearly an influential audience and whatnot too. But it's interesting. So like that's another complexity with that product development and whatnot. So getting the evidence, knowing how viable and all that stuff is. I think it's an awesome comic. I think you have nothing to worry about with that.
Oh,
well,
thank you.
You were asking for that. So,
but yeah, no, I wasn't. But I thank you for that.
But it's a hard puzzle based on the product and audience that you're. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I chronicled this on the Thunder Punch Daily Show too. Is that it's like, I know going in that this is not a very internet-y comic. It's not something where it's like, oh, this is a snackable little piece of something that really hits people's pain points, like the oatmeal, or I don't know, XKCD or, the name the big ones. They tend to be, they're hitting in a really excellent and funny way. They're hitting a pain point that people are like, yep, I've been there. And I'm going to show my friends, right? When you're dealing with a long form narrative, and especially one that's really kind of intended for younger audiences, odds are stacked pretty much against me that anybody on Facebook is going to be sharing that, right? So, which is another reason I don't post it natively on Facebook. That and the fact that Facebook's image compression blows chunks. But anyway, we should get back to systems. So
that's such a deep topic.
Yeah.
Yes. Back to systems.
Yeah. So the big thing, the big puzzle piece I'm trying to solve is how can I find ways to work on it wherever I am without a sense of panic. And so, and part of that is like a mental alignment thing. It's sort of like when I jokingly talked in the past about how I'll sometimes use that mantra of like, I am not my body, I'm the witness, to sort of like bring myself down again, calm the heck down. You're feeling something, experience it, but don't react to it too unduly, right? Try to be aware of that emotional state where you can readily jump in and create on demand. And I know I've provided myself with evidence that I have done it in the past. I can do it. Let's just keep doing it. Let's make that part of the practice. But then also, part of the system, and this is something we kind of didn't talk about a little bit, is there was an equipment factor to this, right? The reason I got the Surface Pro 2 was so that I can work on the comic anywhere, right? So I'll be waiting in the parking lot for my wife to get out of work. I've got 5 minutes. I can get a little bit of coloring done in that 5 minutes. And again, it's not a panic thing. It's like, better get this done fast. It's more like, oh, if I'm just sitting here, instead of just looking at Twitter or Facebook, I could be putting that time. Here's that 5 minutes. I've got that 5 minutes to give to Boulder and Fleet. And again, it's a pleasure to do. So right now, at any rate. But how do I keep that mindfulness up? Because I know that my my bandwidth is going to be at a premium in the coming months. So that'll be part of the challenge. And then in terms of the writing thing, I think part of it is another mental alignment goal that is a sort of a supporting goal for the overall goal, is that trusting that by staying in practice, it will continue to be easier for me to make the time for it and to leap into it and to write upcoming scenes without feeling like, oh God, I'm going to hit a block and this is the part of the story where I failed in front of everybody, right? Which is a fear that a lot of us, if not all of us, experience from time to time. And then is another explicit goal that I set that sort of the Boulder and Fleet comic is in service to, is that one of the things I wanted to do this year is level up my coloring skills. I want to get better at this coloring stuff so I feel more confident in talking with other people who paint and do digital coloring. So I feel like I can walk up to them and talk with them about it without leading with the disclaimer of, well, I'm not really a colorist. I do it, but I don't call myself a colorist. I want to be able to call myself a colorist. I want to be able to say that I paint digitally. I want to feel like I can own that title. And so I need to level up that skill. I know that doing a weekly webcomic is going to bring me there, because it's going to make me face a lot of difficult decisions on the page, right? And then another one was, leveling up my skills in compression and clarity. Now, Rob, you saw, I shared privately an in-progress page of Boulder and Fleet where I was dealing with exactly that. Like, I want a lot of things to happen on this page, and I want to direct the eye in a very certain way. Am I doing it? I'm not sure. And I was asking for help from my friends. Like, can everybody look at this and tell me if there's any problems with this? Because I'm not sure if I'm getting there. Right? But the battle I was facing is can I make this clear in a compressed and visually pleasing way? Because you're dealing with a 2400 pixel by 2400 pixel square. Not much you can do in that canvas. Right? It really limits my options, but also frees me up to make some creative choices. Were you gonna say something?
Oh my gosh, you're just to tack on there. You are awesome, and I am inspired, mildly jealous for how you've pulled off a goal that I've had that I've not quite found a way to resolve because
which is what?
The brain trust. The brain trust. You've got that habit, and it's awesome, and I love. I'm excited and honored to be part of that. Where like I might have be able to share some thoughts even in some small way, contribute or whatever, and it's fun to be part of that conversation. But also, what an amazing asset. Brain trust. What the heck is that? It's basically if you have a group of trusted people that you can reach out to have some critique and insight at whatever recurring or ad hoc basis. I'm puzzling out these different things regarding my business, or hey, what do you guys use for the legal aspect of this or that, or hey, you know what, this is a creative work in progress and I have a question, whatever. Anyway, freaking amazing, so awesome.
And it's not only a benefit to me, but look, I'm going to get crass for a second, Rob, because this is on the ground. We're talking about practical application of these things.
Crass it up.
Yeah, I'm going to crass the heck out of it. So, it's a benefit to me, but it also, it's networking, right? It's establishing a connection between me and fellow professionals by asking them for help, right? And
Ben Franklin.
Yeah,
it's
the Ben Franklin thing.
Effect.
Yeah, the Ben Franklin effect. Let's talk about that. This was passed around on brainpickings.org a while back, but he had this very vocal detractor. And then he wrote, so Ben Franklin wrote this very polite letter to him saying, like, hey, you've got a book in your collection that I really need, and it's the only one I can get my hands on is in your collection. It'd be a huge help to me if you gave me that book just for a while, but you loaned it to me. And like suddenly this guy found himself being like one of Franklin's most staunchest supporters. Why? Well, some scientists, different psychologists posit this theory that when we help somebody, our brain, maybe whatever reason the guy chose to loan him the book, whatever his internal reasoning was at the time. Maybe it was politeness, maybe it was flattery, because Franklin did flatter him by saying, like, you've got this incredible collection and I need access to it. Could you help me out, right? Could have been that. We don't know what his initial motivation was. But once that act of kindness was done, once he helped somebody, his brain has got to figure out. We write stories in our heads all the time that explain our actions. Right? This is one of those cognitive things. Is it a cognitive bias, Rob? Probably.
It's the narrative bias.
The narrative bias. We got to find, everything has to happen for a reason. And that's why when people look back on their histories, they're like, it's as if it was written for me. It's as if everything meant to happen that way. Part of that is our narrative bias. So he had to come up with a reason for why he helped Franklin. Well, your brain in those situations is going to tell you, well, I wanted to help him after all. Because after all, he's not that bad a guy. Actually, he's a pretty good guy. Actually, he's a great guy, right? Mm-hmm. That's not my primary motivation for doing something like that, asking for help. But I know it's there. I know that it makes people feel good to help me, because I know it makes me feel good to help other people. Not just because the Bible told me that it's good or that my mom told me that it's good, but because our brains are these funny, complex things that make up all sorts of funny reasons for why we do the things that we do. And you saw that some of my friends went above and beyond. Like, I posted this on New Year's Eve expecting nobody to react to it for like at least 24 hours. But a whole bunch of people chimed in, and some people even went and downloaded the image and then reconfigured it for me to say, what about this? What about this? And I was like, wow, really? You took that much? Maybe it didn't take them that much time. But the fact is, they were thinking really hard about it for me, right? So I'm offloading cycles. I'm getting valuable feedback from people whose opinions I deeply trust and respect. And also, I'm deepening my connection with them, which, again, is one of those, like, sort of, it's not even foremost on my mind, but I'm just aware of it in the periphery of this thing.
Well, and one giant aspect to me is it's a great shortcut toward triangulating and trying to get past your own biases. Because, although it's complimentary to be asked, you're not receiving if they're good at being part of that kind of brain trust. They are being critical thinkers and are trying to understand, like, your goals and why you're trying to accomplish it and all that, and going to propose things with pretty strong rationale that then you can evaluate, and that will come from a variety of different perspectives. That is just it's an amazing asset where you just get outside your own bubble. So
yeah,
anyway.
I mean, and that's just like a habit that I have now, is not be afraid to ask for help from people whose opinions I trust.
So good.
So but yeah, I didn't even expect to go on that. That was actually a pretty good sideline on that. And I mean, it helps me identify, like you said, like triangulation, future resources for projects. And like that triangulation of getting out of my own bias was great because I knew how some of the people in the thread were going to react. I was like, okay, this person and this person are going to totally see it my way. I wonder what these other people are going to say. And then I was right. Like these two people came in, they said exactly what I thought, but then they offered like a little bit extra critique that I didn't ask for, which led me down a whole different path. Anyway, it was just incredibly useful. So, compression and clarity is one of the things that I want to get better at, and I know that by setting up the Boulder and Fleet webcomic the way I did, oh man, it's bringing me face to face with compression and clarity, because when you only have a box, right, with only so much room in there, and I got to make the letters such a size in order to be readable on phones, there's only so much I could do on a page, right? And that's been a huge challenge in doing the book. And then finally, another skill I wanted to get better at is character-driven storytelling. And what better way to do that, to get better, to level up that thing, than to put myself in a weekly bind where I have to make this tiny little box, fill it with characters and action and adventure and cool art, and yet still do it in such a way that you give a darn about anybody in that box, right? That's been a huge challenge as well, right? And like finding a way to make the characters talk about the plot in a way that only they can do, and have the things that they're referring to in the plot cycle back to or become expressions of their inner lives, so we can tell the differences between one of them, each of them, and that we care about their viewpoints on this. Whew. That's a lot of things to try to level up.
That is a beefy project.
I might be puffing it up a little bit, Rob.
No, I'm not trying to overblow it. It just, we're characterizing where you think of something, you could call anything where you're doing it on a recurring basis. Maybe you could label it as a practice, right? Mm-hmm. I think this as a practice is some different other thing. It's like it's significantly more complex because you're practicing many things in parallel and synchronized. So it's I don't know what to call it, but practice doesn't seem to cover it. So,
well, I don't know. I mean, this is all about perspective and hours logged as well, because I wouldn't be. If you asked me in 2002 to be doing what I'm doing now, there's no way I would be able to walk into it with the same kind of comfort level I'm doing now. Right? This comes after many, many, many pages of comics made. So,
well, I mean, capacity is elastic, right?
Yeah.
So you've grown your capacity, and it's not as high of a cost for you because you have the space for it.
I have the space. I have the visual bags of tricks that I can pull out. Mm-hmm. Right? Not every page is a blank slate of creative challenges, right? There's a lot of challenges I've already beaten years ago that I can just pull that same sword out and beat it again this time. But what I'm looking for is what are the new challenges I can find with this new format and so on. And I just identified them. So we can move on now to we talk about the life cycle of a system.
Yeah. So I thought a good way to summarize and wrap up is to get a little more detailed into the systemic way of looking at goals. It really doesn't take anything overly complex other than knowing that, well, you've got an intention when you start, and then there's some point, there's a beginning, there's a continuing, it goes on, and then there's a finishing. And within there's likely activities that signify like what you do, like what do you do when you kick it off, and how do you keep it going, and what does the outcome and what does stopping look like? I'm really curious, like how does any of this kind of like, well, that systemic approach, like when you hear about it, Jerzy, what kind of things come to mind? Is it's like intriguing, sound overly complex?
I see. Like what kind of initial assumptions do I have when I think of systems? Yeah. The word that comes to my mind is dry. Rote.
Sure.
Right.
Boring.
Yeah, because what you're saying is, and this is one of my personal, I'm going to use that word again, bugbear, because somebody in the chat was saying that I should trademark it. I don't know if it's trademarkable, but it's a fun word. C.S. Lewis used it a lot. Is if you do A, B, and C, then D will naturally occur, right? I get really itchy about that assumption. I don't have to think about it anymore because I got a system in place, right? And systems also make me think of you are foregoing the happy accidents of making things. Is when I'm in that stressed out or freaked out or inspired or whatever kind of emotional word you want to throw at place. Emotions don't adhere to systems, Rob. Robots are systems.
Sure.
Emotions are not systemic, right? You asked me for reactions. I'm giving you like those initial, and I am
waving the yep.
I am trolling you
the
right
bull.
now.
Yep, teasing the bull. Go ahead.
Exactly what I'm doing. Emotions are not systemic. Robots are systemic. So if I don't have that freedom to, bathe in those emotions and react to them, I'm going to miss out on those wonderful, happy accidents that lead me to great insights.
I think it's really cool to acknowledge the value of happy accidents. So you do things and then unexpected things can happen, right? Now, what I would do is I would classify that flow a bit differently, because I I see that implicitly thinking of characterizing creative efforts as things that shouldn't be explicit. They're implicit. Implicit's really good. Explicit sucks, because when I get explicit, I'm destroying the magic or the feeling I get around it.
Midi-chlorians.
Right.
That's the one everybody goes back to.
Damn. So I'm
Guys, I'm fighting dirty now, just by the way. That's parenthetically, I am totally playing dirty pool by invoking the Star Wars card.
You like it when I get fired up, don't you?
I do.
Okay. So there is a I would characterize that as a false dichotomy between all art of amazing significance, or that is worth love or loving to create, is done through the realm of mystery, and that's totally an outlook that I think some people can find to be sustainable. But then if you're trying to do anything as a service, where I'd like to get paid to do this, chances are you're going to have to get up and do it anyway when there's no magic. Or you find out a little bit more from having the tough times that what was assumed to be magic was just being prepared, right? And you were ready to meet what you set out to do. The reason you could do the art is because you had practiced for whatever amount of time that you needed, and you had the confidence to approach a new project because you have gained experience, and you trust that you trust yourself as an instrument to commit to a project, whatever. And you don't have to observe that. But I would posit that by not observing it, you are maybe willfully so, giving up the ability to participate more interestingly with your art and your process, and to find of how it could benefit both you and the world more. You're just going to have to make more observations about it. And yeah.
Okay, observations. I want to hear some observations. So you talked about like this life cycle has a beginning. You're doing something to start the thing, and then the thing is underway. So when you describe this, I instantly visually I see one of those. Oh, what are those called? Those
Rube Goldberg machine.
Rube Goldberg machines. Wow, how did you intuit that just from my hand gestures? That's amazing. Because I always want to say Myers-Briggs machine, but that's a totally different thing. Rube Goldberg. And Rube Goldberg was a cartoonist for crying out loud. How can I not?
I totally have an introvert candle that launches an extrovert bowling ball.
Right. which
Yeah,
makes a
burning
chicken lay an egg that falls into a catcher's mitt that that launches a pin
trying to
that pops a
combine
balloon.
Myers-Briggs and Rube Goldberg at the same time. It's a tough
Oh,
joke to make. Um,
but okay, so you've got this big machine going off. How, like, what kind of feedback things, like in like a general sense, what kind of feedback things should you be prepared for along that way, to keep an eye out for in order to A, evaluate how the machine's going, and B, stay motivated to keep the machine going.
we chatted about some of it before. Things to notice are you showing up to attempt that goal, right? And at some point you need to notice, well, to remember you had the goal, and so there's some kind of reflective process that's I think, like you mentioned, Dave Say's Groundhog Day approach.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, he uses he takes January off, right, and then does the 2nd of February, 3rd of March, whatever. So yeah, the given day of the number of the day that the current month is when he reviews how he's been doing. So yeah, ending on 12.
What you're describing is something that has, and the word you used was rhythm. There's a rhythm to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like, well, I don't feel like working today, so I guess I'll self-critique. I'm going to look at how everything's going. You set some kind of cycle to this, like when you're going to stop and look at how everything's working, how the system's working, how what you're making is turning out. I think a question you put in here is like, when do you decide to look back at what you've done so far? At what point is it time to check in on it? Is that something you personally, do you intuit, or is it something that you set, sort of like you make a proclamation about that to yourself? Because David Says is explicit. He sets like these days, these times, right?
Totally. I do it roughly weekly and daily, and then with a deeper dive a few times a year. The deepest dive being my sort of annual planning quest that I do basically all December. And the activities are similar, but just the amount of them and how long and whatnot vary. So it more or less, it just means schedule and budget for time to be in the mode of reflecting. And through the reflecting, the outcome of that should be, what are you trying to do? How is it going? It's like a mini review of your intention and the activities that you've taken to act upon that intention.
I found that my Trello board becomes my weekly check-in, because I've got a board of, what did I do this week? Like there's like a to be done this week, what I'm doing today, and what is done this week. I've got my personal Trello board. And so at the end of every week, I have to archive the what I did this week board or list, right? And that becomes an automatic built-in way to revisit. Well, here you go. Here's you reporting in on what you did. And here's what's left over in the to-be-done list.
Absolutely. So you're exposed to that. So what does that cause you? Do you feel like your art magic draining every time you look at it?
Jar Jar Binks pops in. and then suddenly all the stormtroopers talk with Australian accents, and it isn't fun for me anymore. No, it's super valuable data. And then, I mean, and because it's weekly, it's fresh enough that I can, when I see like that list is shorter, I can say, okay, well, here were extenuating circumstances, or, oh, well, I remember doing that, and that was a big project, right? It's one sentence, but it represents 10 hours of work, right? So yeah, it's super valuable data. It's super valuable data to see how I'm doing, and then I can look at when I have a shorter list, and when I go, none of those were big, and nothing extenuating happened this week. All right, time to look at oneself, right? What did you do this week, Jerzy? Oh, I did a lot of procrastinating. I know why, because the second thing on that out list was something I really didn't want to do. And instead of procrastinating by putting that attention on something that was actually what I wanted to do, because you can always use procrastination time to put a little bit of extra time into some kind of passion project, I didn't do anything good. I wasted time.
But okay, this is one of the this is the dangerous ground where I think goals start to get thrown out,
Okay.
and it's worth noticing that.
Let's
And there's
go there.
kind of like this meta thing of or it's your overall foundational health for tackling goals and stuff, right? Where this is where new goals may pop up. Like, you know what? I need a spa day, or
Yeah.
I need to somehow nourish myself, so I'm ready to get back into this system, or whatever your metaphor is for that list of things. You notice you're not doing it, and if one of the answers why, it's like, well, I'm just kind of drained. I need more sleep, or whatever.
No, you're right. You're right. And yeah, I thank you for that clarification, because yes, there were weeks in the past couple months where I said, guess what? You didn't get much sleep this last week. That's why this didn't happen. You know what you're doing right now? You're taking a nap, and you're going to let yourself take a nap, and you are not going to feel bad about taking a nap. I want you to communicate this to Kate, and I'm saying it publicly because it was on the show, but like something she said very casually that was just so transformative for me was when she described a moment where she and your daughter were kind of both having a bad day together, and she had the presence of mind to sit down across from your daughter and say, I think we're both just in a really bad mood right now, and just stopping and looking at it in the face and accepting it as something that's not to be wrestled with, but something just to be faced and accepted, and then you can move on. Oh my gosh, I think about that all the darn time. Like whenever I'm like you're describing, like you come across a Trello board that's a little shorter than you'd hoped it would be, right? Sometimes you're just having a rotten week, and instead of wrestling with it, going like, I'm gonna be a hero and I'm not gonna let this ever happen again, maybe there's something that needs to be addressed there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at that point, whatever your outlook is, you're facing information that maybe you're not ready to face, or you're totally ready to face, or what have you. And even then, it still could be draining, not good news, frustrating, depressing. It's what you're describing is essentially like a vulnerability kind of habit, and it's definitely like it which has been a like a theme in our house. You mentioned Kate. It's like, well, especially in the last few years after having kids and whatnot. It's something that I mentioned earlier in the podcast where I said where if you look at your past, like having past goals and having them over year, it's a great kind of context if you're willing to face it with that kind of forgiveness and openness to and I'm not trying to have some kind of weird ironic bravado about vulnerability. It's not easy.
That is funny. That is like a danger of this thing. It's like, I'm the most vulnerable guy in the room.
Exactly. More vulnerable than you, dang it.
I'm the best at being vulnerable. Yeah.
That's perfect. That is a good t-shirt, actually.
Actually, that I'm gonna take credit for that. That was a good joke.
Yeah. So how do you face that though? And this is where goals start to get thrown out, and where I see people facing that threshold where lots of folks are blahing about their goals and reflecting on their year, and then you see other folks looking at it and as with this, they're defeated and they're frustrated and whatnot, and that's okay. I understand, and I hope that is a place to where the it doesn't have to stop there. Like the goal, the planning can continue. You probably need other stuff first.
And it's a cliche, but I think there's a truth to it, is that failing is learning. Right?
Totally.
When I hear somebody give me a list of everything they failed at, what I hear is, wow, you racked up like 40-pound bags of experience today. Right? Look at all the XP points you got from going through all those experiences, providing you go back and look at what you did and figure out the next move, instead of going like, well, you can't fight City Hall, right?
Yeah, you can't cash in on the wisdom if you don't look back at the experience.
Yep, that's right.
And and you can leave it behind, and that's a great practice too, is simplifying and shedding and whatnot, but like not in the to the extent that it creates some kind of strange permanent amnesia, right? A blissful goal avoidance bubble or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So
Blissful goal avoidance bubble. That's great. Well, Rob, we're at time, but I do think that we kind of covered this pretty carefully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know what? Like systems and goal setting, this is something that will require revisiting, reinvestigation, re-exploration, check-ins, and so on. Right?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I'm glad that we have an incomplete picture of goals, right? And this is a lot of the kind of thinking that we put into it, though.
That's what we do on this thing. This Lean Into Art Cast is we model our thinking by taking on topics that are challenging, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we telegraphed at the start. So nobody should be surprised by what they got. But if you're surprised by what you got in a pleasant way, you like what you got. A great way you can thank us is, you could go like to one of the social media places and say, hey, I listened to this thing or watch this thing called Lean Into Art. Here's where it is. It's really great. That's a terrific way to do it. That goes back to something Rob was talking about. Here I am, and thanks for making what you made. But you could do it in a way that's perfectly anonymous and easy. Is just go to iTunes, give us a star review, however many stars you think we deserve. You could write a review if you want to. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, giving the video a thumbs up. That helps more people find the thing, find the show. If you get some value out of it, a great way you can help us out and pay it forward is by letting other people know about it. And those are two easy ways to do it. Or if you're like really into what we do and you're like, boy, you know what, you guys give me so much value and I want to say hello and thanks for making the thing, you could go to our Patreon page. And that's at patreon.com/leanintoart. And that's where you'll find all these shows as well as the extra leans that we do, the extra podcasts we do in between the Lean Into Art casts, where it's more casual, just me and Rob sort of like finding the topic naturally. Often we don't even know what we're going to talk about before we hit record. Sometimes we'll just be talking about something else, and I'll say, hit record. We got to start talking about, we got to go where we're going right now. We need to capture this. But it's always a good time. So that's at patreon.com/leanintoart. Did I miss anything, Rob?
No. And, thank you to our supporters in all of the different places. Like if you put your time into doing the thumbs up and giving, the comments on the Google Plus pages and all that kind of stuff, being a patron, of course, thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks to people
doing this. Extrinsically gives us feedback, and
yeah, you're placing value on what we do.
Yeah,
you're naming it with dollars. Sounds crass, and it is, but it also, hits us in the hearts too, right?
It does, and yeah, thank you. Also, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. Looking forward to 2015. Let's kick the heck out of it. Let's make a lot of neat stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you, Rob. For this is a good one. I feel good about it.
Cool.
And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks when we will stream it live again on YouTube and Google+. And until then, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right. I'm going to kill the stream, everybody. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah,
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.